So one of the reasons that we are on this call, the main reason we're on this call is because all of you guys have expressed an interest in wanting to be able to go on a mission trip and more importantly, being able to fundraise that mission trip. And so every mission trip does have a cost. And although it can be intimidating, we want to give you guys a confidence about the fact that you can fundraise your mission trip and that it is possible and that it's more of a collaborative experience than sometimes it can seem. So the idea is for you to feel empowered as you leave this call. And I do want to assure you that our Victory Missions team is here to support you in your journey. So whether you've signed up for a mission trip or not, if at any point in time you would just like to reach out and have some questions for any one of us that are going to be speaking today, we would love to speak with you and just help affirm or clarify some of the things that have been shared. So know that we are here for you. But with that, we are going to transition into the question of why do we fundraise? And so when we think about why do we fundraise, one of the reasons we're talking about that is because we're going on a mission trip. So why are we going on a mission trip? Well, if you've been a part of Victory for any amount of time, you know that our founding pastor has always had a heart for us to impact the nations. And so part of the ways that we can do that is by going on a mission trip. And generally, the costs that are going to be involved are the costs that are needed to accommodate anyone's stay if you're traveling. So that cost is going to include your airfare, it's going to include your lodging, it's going to include transportation. Sometimes it may include ministry activities. And so these costs, although very, very necessary, can sometimes be a deterrent for people who are excited or interested in going on a mission trip, but just don't feel as though they have the means. And so what we want to do in this meeting, in this webinar, is help you guys grasp the idea of partnership and collaboration. One of the things that my former missions pastor used to always say is there are senders and there are goers. And it's a peculiar phrase, and some of you guys may have already heard that phrase before, but here is the idea. God is calling us all to have an impact, but that impact may look different from person to person. And so there are some seasons of life where I have said, yes, God is calling me to go and serve in this place. And all I need is some provision and some partners to help me get there. But there have been other seasons, kind of like this one I'm in now, where I have an 18-month-old baby, and it's a little harder to go. And so the way that I've been able to help sow into missions is by helping to send my friends and my peers, those people who are in a position or in a season where they are able to go. And so when you think about it from that mentality, just know that we all have a part to play. It's not as though God is just saying like, hey, this is for some of you and it's not for others. And so figuring out what is your role in a particular season and then feeling bold and comfortable enough to invite others into that process as the goer and the sender. So maybe that phrase is helpful for you to remember. It's always something that has stuck with me, but that is kind of the umbrella of thinking that we want you guys to consider as you're listening to this webinar today. So what I want to do is I'm actually going to pass it to a dear friend of mine named Desiree, who's been coming to Victory for several years now. Desiree has an incredible mission trip experience. She's actually been on 3 mission trips, and God gave her a special word for 2 of them in particular. So I wanted you guys to take some time to hear from her and her testimony. So Desiree, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Alex. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Desiree Johnson. As Alex mentioned, I've been with Victory for quite some time and have had the honor and the privilege to be able to go on 3 mission trips. And 2 in particular, I wanted to just kind of stop by and share my personal fundraising experiences that God brought me through and just strengthened my faith in that fundraising process. So I'm gonna just dive right into it. And I hope this encourages you guys and gives you guys some hope to know that you're not alone in this, and it's a process. So my first experience, I would say, it was a pioneering trip. We actually went to Ireland, Dublin, Ireland, where we kind of partnered with the Christian organization for all the churches, Christian churches in Ireland, and the youth groups. So with that one, that was like my first kind of global mission trip that I experienced. So with that fundraising process, it was very new to me. I was just graduating college. I didn't know where the means or anything was going to come from. And considering that it was a pioneering trip, and I'm that kind of like type A personality, I need point A, B, C, and D as to how I'm going to navigate this. I was like, well, Lord, what do I do? I'm gonna pray on it. Let me see if this is your will. And he said yes. He said, yes, I want you to go. So with that, I knew it was the start of him stretching me and growing me personally, with trusting him, not only as the person to send me, but also the person to provide the means to get there, and the resources to get there. So with that experience, during one of something similar to what we're having now, when the group leaders were going over tips about how to start fundraising, how to partner with people and share the vision, one thing stood out to me, which was the tip of doing personal letters, inviting people into the vision, taking a moment to just kind of sit down, and write out your why. Like, why do you feel God is leading you and calling you to missions, whether short term or long term missionary work? And just like give people an opportunity to buy into the vision of as to why you're being led and why you feel that's a calling God has placed in your life. And know that you'll personally get stretched in your individual walk, in your individual journey and relationship with God, with trusting his character of being provider, not only shepherd in leading you to say yes to the mission trip, but also trusting that he will provide. If he called you to it, he will provide the resources to get you to where he's calling you to share his good news. So leading into that, I sat down, I wrote down the letter, my first ever mission trip letter, and just poured out my heart, poured out my, uncertainties about it in the letter, but still being prompted and being intentional about moving forward with what God was calling me to do. And I went old school. I packed it, I wrote it out, actually typed it because, my script, my hand is a little confusing. So I didn't want anybody to be misled about what I was saying. So I typed it out, and then I folded the letters and put them in envelopes, stuffed them. And then I was like, okay, Lord, what do we do now? And he, in my quiet time and just in prayer with him, he was like, well, go, what about thinking about your day to day? Like, who's in your day to day that you can partner with, that you can share the vision so that they can have the opportunity to contribute, to help support you in getting there. So that's when I looked at unlikely places that you would think, but should be the first places we should go to is people in our day to day. So people on my job. This was also stretching my faith and sharing the gospel and going on missions even there before I even went overseas, because it challenged me to just talk to people, share people that I wouldn't normally do with the vision and why I feel led and what I believe in. And so that gave me the opportunity to foster relationships, foster the infancy of what now is my missions community, where if God has prompted me to go on another mission trip, or if I know of a team member that may be doing something in missions, whether locally or globally, I have a outlet in people that want to pour into that I can reach out to. So another thing too with that experience that I learned is that he was teaching me not only to ask people to partner with me, but me also partnering with him in my personal budget. Like, that was the first time he kind of just prompted to me, is like, so before you go and just ask other people to like buy into the vision, we need to take a little, personal rank, check to be like, well, where are your resources going? Are you budgeting? Are you being intentional about the call that I placed on your life? I gave you that heart and that desire to serve in missions, whether short term, whether globally or so start to budget, start to set aside money every month like you would for groceries, like you would for anything else that you're intentional about, and see how I can grow that and not only partner with other people, but get you there even further. So that was like kind of my own personal conviction that God was continuing to work in me as he revealed to me the call of missions he placed on my heart. So that was the infancy of my missions budget, which kind of leads me into my second experience. And I got the privilege to go to South Korea with this about like maybe 2 or 3 years ago now, in 2019. And with that trip experience, one thing he was growing with me with that of when you're faithful with little, I can, trust you with more. And with the emphasis that I mentioned in my previous mission trip experience to Ireland, with starting the budget, he not only said yes to go, but he told me, but for this one, even though the flight is more expensive, even though having to fly is even further, because I'm not one to fly. I don't really like flying, but he was like, I'm calling you to it. I'll see you through it. So I was like, okay. He said, I also want you to fund and support most of your trip and then see how you can support and fund and help fundraise for your team. So with that experience, he was teaching me how, hey, remember back then when I had you start sowing into the vision that I've given you for missions? I looked at my savings budget and I had the money to pretty much support like the entire trip through what he was convicting me of to start always putting aside something to the vision he's called me to. And with that, I still didn't stop there as far as like reaching out to my missions community that had already established in that season of my first mission trip. I also reached out to new people because, like we all know, we go through different seasons in life and different people come in and out of our journeys as we walk with God. And there were new people that they were buying into the vision. They were like, oh, when are you going? Oh, I would love to sew in. And during that transaction and that conversation, I was able to say, well, God had blessed. I'm able to fund my trip, but here's how you can still sow into the vision of sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. As we go to South Korea, I have other team members and put them into contact with them, and they were able to sow into the team because at the end of the day, it's more so of them sowing into the fact that they want to partner with the body of Christ to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's not just funding you, but I always made sure I was pointing back to God of, it's not you just supporting me, but you're supporting the vision of sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ to everyone. So that was definitely the two experiences that were vastly different, but God showed me and grew me personally in those different character traits of him and going deeper personally, as well as being able to experience how to fundraise, how to evangelize, and pretty much invite people into the mission as a globally of it's not just stopping at, oh, yes, I want to go on a mission trip, but being able to partner with people of just sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. So as I kind of wrap up, I just kind of want to leave y'all with three things to kind of leave you with little nuggets that I've gained along my experiences is one, always invite God in to the entire process. I think sometimes we stifle him and try to put a cap on him with just praying about, well, whether I should go and then just leave him until we get to actually going and then praying for him to be there, but invite him even into the fundraising process. You all are vastly different and uniquely created by God, and you're in different spheres and different contexts where he can show you how you are to fundraise where you are. Two, I want to encourage you to, when you do share with others, empower them to share with others as well, because they have people in their circles and in their context that would love to buy into it. Strangers even poured into my first mission trip through the people that I had shared with, them sharing with their friends and their family. And then lastly, commit to supporting the call and to missions yourself individually. Taking that time and being intentional about budgeting yourself for sowing into the call that God has placed on your life, the gifts that he's given you, and also positioning yourself and being in the opportunity to bless someone else when that budget that you have consistently put $10 to has exceedingly and abundantly through God's grace exploded, and be able to support others in that mission trip. So now I'm gonna pass it over, toss it to my friend Emily, and she's gonna kind of talk through some more tips for us as fundraising. Thank you all.
Thanks, Des. That was awesome. Just hearing your stories and your experiences of what you experienced as you were fundraising is just encouraging to know that it's not all on you. It's not just your burden. It's a partnership, but also as God's calling you and as God's giving you wisdom to, there's a lot more that goes beyond that too. So my name's Emily, and I've had the privilege of being at Victory for over 10 years? I don't know. I lost track. But one of my favorite things that I've gotten to do at Victory is lead our youth missions trips. So we're going to talk a little bit about the how. I'm going to go through some practical steps of fundraising and some tips for it. But I like stories. So this is just going to be story time with Emily, if that's okay with you guys. So I went on my first missions trip when I was in sixth grade. God bless our kids pastors at that church. They took kids as young as 9 and up to 14 on missions trips. I want you to imagine 100 older elementary school students driving 24 hours on a bus to Mexico to go do their missions trip. My pastors were incredible, and I have so much respect for them. They are missionaries in Guatemala now, and I just have so much respect for them. But I got to have that experience when I was young, and I got to fundraise for my first missions trip when I was in sixth grade. And something that I don't want this to sound bad, but I'm proud to be able to say is my parents never supported my missions trips when I was in elementary school. Not because they weren't supportive of me in general, but just because they didn't have to, because I always fundraised my trips. I never was in a situation where I'm like, I'm short, I'm going to have to do something about this. So I've had some great experiences over the years being able to fundraise myself and then help our students, especially our middle schoolers and high schoolers here at Victory, being able to fundraise for their trips. And something, if there's one thing that I could leave you guys with today, I would just encourage you that partnership mentality that Des was talking about, because sometimes I'm more of a self-conscious person. So when I think about fundraising, I get a little nervous. I'm like, oh, I don't want to be a salesperson. I don't want to go beg people for money. This is awkward. But something that I had to do is I had to get out of the mentality of I'm asking people for help and I'm allowing people the opportunity to partner with the gospel. Not just partnering with me, but partnering with what God is doing in these nations and these ministries. And through my network and my community, God may be able to bring someone in as part of this that otherwise may not have been a part. So, as we talk today, I'm going to talk about a lot of really practical things, but I just want to encourage us to think in that partnership mindset and keeping the partnership of someone coming alongside to share the gospel instead of just asking for money or being a salesperson. Um, but as we kind of jump in to talk about the practical side of it, I love what Des talked about, that she felt called to start a missions budget herself. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We'll get back into the slides. But when I think about the early missionaries like Paul, something that comes to mind for me is he was a tent maker. He took up tent making as his own thing to do to fund his travels, but then also he relied on the hospitality of the people he visited. So when we think about missions fundraising, I want to talk about two sides of it. One is our side of fundraising and partnership and all that, but the first part is that personal giving. And one of my favorite verses to talk about this is 2 Samuel 24:24. It's a story where David was about to make a sacrifice to thank God for something. And he was with a bunch of other believers, and he was like, hey, can I buy this field so I can sacrifice it? And the person who owned the field said, no, let me just give it to you. You're giving it to God. So let me partner with you in that. And David said, no, I will not sacrifice something that didn't cost me anything. So as we're looking into fundraising and funding our missions trips, I think something huge to consider on the front end is what you're personally giving into this trip. And that's something that as you pray, you can talk to God about, and God will direct you in that. But I've seen time and time again that the more people give, whether that's putting skin in the game through fundraising or they're giving out of what they have of themselves, oftentimes that ties their heart to the mission further. And often those are the people that get the most out of the trips. Going back to my middle school experiences, we had some people that you could tell their parents paid for their trip because they wanted them to go on this trip and have this experience with God. And for me personally, when I went on my first missions trip, that is what ignited my fire for God. I grew up in church, but that's what took me to the next level in owning my personal relationship with God. And you could tell who was there because they wanted to be and who was there because their parents wanted them to be and they had a free ride. So obviously, as a full-grown adult, you are doing this on your own. You are making your decision. But it's just something to think about that oftentimes I've seen when people are giving of themselves, they get more out of the process as well. So some of that may be something like what Des talked about. That may be putting part of your personal budget aside, or that may also be something like the ideas we have here: hosting a garage sale, reselling some clothes. I'm a huge fan of going and dropping off stuff I'm never wearing again to Plato's Closet. Cleaning out your house. This is a great way that you can kill two birds with one stone. Do some minimalizing, and then using some of those funds towards your missions trip. And that also may include sacrificing something financially. And this is a way that you can give personally, but also invite people in. If you're a coffee fiend, I know every single fundraiser ever talks about just give one coffee a day, $5, and then it'll go towards this. But if you choose that you're going to sacrifice Starbucks from now until your trip, or you're going to sacrifice eating out from now until your trip, that's something that is you're sharing with potential partners. That's something that you're sharing, that you're sacrificing yourself, and you may challenge them to make that same sacrifice and take that part of that budget to match it for you. So that's just some ideas of some ways that we personally give. But as we talk about partnering with other people, let's talk about that why. So, really quick, I was just looking up some stats, and 69% of the general population gives towards charity every year. That is a huge amount of people. I think people are a lot more generous than I normally think and assume. I kind of think everyone's just going to be on their own team doing their own thing, but really a lot of people give. So, why not give people the opportunity to give it towards your trip? So when I was looking at some of the top reasons that people give, I simplified them and tried to keep them down and easy. But I'm sure you guys know this as well. But giving, whether that's of your time or your money, it makes you happy. It increases your dopamine, and it just feels like a good thing to do. And another reason is donors feel empowered when they see their gifts actually doing good. People like to know that what they're doing is actually making a difference. And this is what I love about our victory trips, because in the past couple of years, sometimes missions trips have gotten a bad reputation of just coming in, putting on an event and leaving and making a one-day difference, but not really making a long-term difference in the community. And sometimes they can actually hurt more than they help. But what I love about Victory's missions trips is everywhere we go, we are partnered with local ministries. In Mexico, we have our own mission space where we have our own missionaries planted there that builds relationships with the community. And all of our other trips, we have ministries that we partner with. So when we're going, we're not just going in and painting a building that locals probably could have done better for way cheaper. We're partnering with these organizations that are in the community day in and day out, know what they need. We come alongside and help them. And then that ministry is still there to follow up and continue watering those seeds and reaping that harvest as we're able to go in. So that's just one of the things I love about victory trips, that when people give towards victory trips, they can trust that it's actually going towards good. Another reason why people give is because they may have a personal, emotional connection to a cause. Like we have a trip that goes to the Philippines every year that deals with sex trafficking, and a lot of people have a huge heart for seeing that ended. And as I mentioned, I started going on missions trips in elementary school. I led middle school missions trips. So whenever I hear a younger person going on missions trips, I love sewing into that so that hopefully they can have the same kind of experience that I did. So a lot of times people have a personal, emotional connection to that. The next reason is the recipient is one that donors can trust. And that is the power of your connections. People know you, people love you, and people trust the God in you and the things that you're doing. So a lot of people will want to invest and sow into you because they love you. A lot of people want to be part of something bigger than themselves, even as Alex was mentioning earlier, that she's not in a season where she's traveling as much as she is partnering and giving. And during COVID, a lot of people kind of took a back seat but everyone has that desire to be part of something bigger than themselves. And I think this is a fantastic opportunity to be able to partner with you so that they can feel like they're part of the journey too. And lastly, this is the most basic, but something that's really good to understand, and that's for tax purposes. So any gift given towards a Victory Missions trip is tax deductible. Let me clarify really quick. If you are giving towards your own missions trip, that is not tax deductible. So if you did what Des did, which was awesome, you can't write that off on your own taxes. But for anyone else, they are technically giving to Victory Church and it's tax deductible. So you want to make sure that if they are giving a check, they're writing it directly to Victory, giving it to you so that, or sending it to Victory in your name. Or if they're giving online through our version of GoFundMe, which is Go Method. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. But it makes it super easy that people can give directly to your trip, make sure it's going toward you, but they can still get that tax credit for it. So those are just a couple of the top reasons why people give. And now let's talk about who would potentially give. So as we're talking through this fundraising journey, one of the first things that you'll want to do is kind of just take a mental inventory. If you're organized like me, you may want to put this into an Excel spreadsheet, but just think through who are some people in your community that may want to give towards your trip. This may be people that are friends of yours, are family members, maybe people that mentored you or led you in the past that have a buy-in to you and may want to give personally. So these are a few categories of people to think about, but I also want to talk about those business connections because when I was fundraising for my missions trips, my orthodontist and my pediatrician were my most regular givers. They donated to every single trip. And that's because a lot of businesses actually have a fund set aside in their budget because they want to get that tax credit, so they might as well have it going towards people that they know. So I would encourage you, one, for personal connections, don't put a cap on who you're asking. Some of the people that gave to my trip are people that I never would have expected. And I've personally never had this happen, but I've known of a lot of people who had non-believing family members or people that would not necessarily want anything to do with a missions trip, but because they believed in the person, they donated. So I'd encourage you as you're making this list, don't limit to yourself to who you think will give or maybe is even in a financial place to give because you never know how God's going to provide and how God's going to put it on their heart. And then also for businesses, I would encourage you just to think outside of the box. I wouldn't necessarily encourage this. I've heard a lot of stories lately of people sending support letters and wedding invitations to people like Bill Gates and other people who have mega money, just because you never know what you're going to get. If the Lord leads you to do that, go for it. But I would encourage you to connect with some business connections that you have because that is an opportunity that they may want to take advantage of. And again, it might as well be going towards your trip. So as we talk about support, there's three main ways that we're talking about inviting support and partnership from other people. And the first way that I want to talk about is prayer. And of course, prayer is part of the greater work of what we're doing in missions. We need people partnering with us and praying so that we can prepare the hearts of the people we're going to be ministering to for safety, for us, for wisdom as we're preparing for the trip. And prayer, sometimes I think when people think about it with fundraising, they kind of think of it as like a two-pronged ask. They're like, hey, I would love for you to partner with me financially, but if you can't, I would love for you to pray for me so that people still feel a part. And I want to encourage you guys to think of prayer as that base level as you're inviting people in. Yes, you're going to usually be asking for financial support, but you're inviting people into a partnership with you too. And prayer is the first and most basic foundation for that. So as you're asking people for prayer for your trips, we're going to talk a little bit about this more towards the end, but I want to encourage you to keep track of the people that say that they're going to partner with you in prayer. So that way, when you get closer to your trip, you can send them updates on how the trip is looking, what training you've been doing, and what prayer requests your team specifically has. Because when you do that, you're inviting them into the process, not just a quick little throwaway prayer of God bless them. But you're inviting them to truly be part of the trip with you. So in addition to prayer, we want to talk about fundraising today. And this is where the bulk of the time that we're going to be spending is. But I also think this is the most fun because this is where your creativity comes into play. This is where you get to use your personality and allow God to shine through you. So we've got these different ideas for fundraising. And as we go through them, I just want to encourage you to think again outside of the box. God created each of you individually and creatively. So take some of these things and think about how you could put them into context for you. So the first one I want to talk about is hosting an event. And these, I think, are some of the most impactful because financially they can be the most profitable for your trip. Some ideas here are hosting a karaoke night or a clothing swap, movie night, sports tournament, all of the things. And a great thing that you can do is encourage your community to invite their community to participate. That's a huge tip I have for this because everyone may not be able to give financially. Everyone can pray, but everyone has a community that, if they're willing, can help you out with. So, one of the things I love seeing is doing like a sports tournament that you can invite people to come together. They're doing something fun. And then also, you can kind of stack your fundraisers a little bit. So, in addition to doing a sports tournament and charging an entry fee, you could also charge a small fee for people to come and watch the tournament. You can sell concessions. You can do a 50-50 raffle where you charge $2 for a ticket. $1 goes towards your cause, and $1 goes towards a raffle pot that whoever wins the raffle gets. So it's a really easy, low cost, no cost thing for you to do. But when you think about hosting these events, this is a great way to get a larger amount of people involved that may not necessarily just be interested in your trip, to get them to partner with you. So next up is service-based, and I'm sure a lot of you would think of babysitting, pet sitting, cleaning, all the basic stuff like that. But another great thing to think about is whatever God has gifted you with specifically. That may be making beats for some people. That may be hosting a little webinar of real estate tips or financial tips, resume writing, whatever that could be. Whatever God has gifted you in, this is a great way that you can serve people in exchange for a donation to your trip. And a tip that I have for this is see how you can multiply this. When I was fundraising for my trips, I really loved kids. I loved ministry to kids, and all of my friends served in kids ministry together. So I got someplace that was willing to host us, and we did a parents' night out that I got a couple of my friends who were background checked. Our church knew that they were trustworthy. We did a parents' night out where any family could come drop off their kids for a couple hours, and we babysit them all at once. And then they would give donations towards the trip. So it was a great way to, instead of just taking a couple hours babysitting, involving my community, and then being able to serve multiple families at once. So I would encourage you, as you're thinking of ways that you can serve people, see how you can multiply it and make it larger in that way too. So next is commissions, and I think this is one of the most fun ways to be able to do this. Crocheting is super popular right now. So being able to crochet a cute little figure of something that's important to the country that you're going to be ministering to, doing any of these ideas to commission some work out for people. Some people like the idea of being able to have something tangible in their hands, whether they feel that for value or as a reminder for prayer. So doing something like this is a fun way to be able to sell your products, use your creativity and gifts and talents to be able to get some donations that way. Next, in this one, I think is personally my favorite opportunity. And this is a cultural exploration night. Obviously, we are at a very culturally reconciled church. And we're in Atlanta, Gwinnett County. We got everybody from everywhere. So I love the idea of being able to host an event. And this can be at your home, this can be at any kind of a location. And some things you can consider are serving food, whether that's a meal or snacks from the country that you're going to be going to. You can make a presentation and talk about some of the things in that country, host a trivia game, share some stories of individuals or the partner ministries that are in that country. This is a great opportunity that after you sign up for your trip, connecting with your trip lead to learn more about the ministries that you're going to be partnering with so that you can spread that mission to the people that you're sharing your stories with too. Again, to invite them to partner, not just with you, but with the bigger picture of what God is doing in the world. So this is a great time that you're able to come, invite them into the culture, invite them into your story, and invite them to give. Something I love doing is getting some candy. Shout out to Buford Highway Farmers Market, but getting some candy from the country that you're going to be visiting to give them a little gift bag as they leave that has that, as well as prayer requests for your trip and information on how to give. This is something that if you wanted to, you could charge a small cover charge to cover your food and the expenses of the trip, but then it's also a great opportunity to invite people to give. So again, like I said, this is one of my favorite ways. And then lastly, for this section, this is what most people think of when you think of a fundraiser. And this may be a car wash, going to Chick-fil-A, asking them to partner with you. What they'll do is anyone who comes in and mentions your fundraiser, they'll give you 10% of their proceeds from that night. You can do an envelope adoption where you write numbers 1 through 100 on an envelope, ask people to sponsor the dollar amount of that envelope to donate towards your trip. Or also t-shirt sales. I've seen these get so creative. There is an organization called Fund the Nations, and they will, you can do pre-orders for your shirts. They'll help you design them. They'll ship them for you. So back in my day, I bought t-shirts, I sold them, I had a bunch of leftovers, and it took a long time for me to break even with that. But I love this company because they will take all of the back end of that for you so you can just focus on your mission. So as we've gone through all of these kind of fundraisers and partnership opportunities, the last area that we want to talk about is financial gifts. And as Desiree talked about, when she did those physical support letters inviting people to give, I want to talk about a couple ways that we do that. So the first is those physical support letters. And I love doing this, especially if you're going to be asking businesses to support you, just because it makes it look a little more official, a little bit more legitimate. And I love doing self-addressed stamped envelopes in with these support letters. So in just a second, I'll talk to you a little bit about how to write a support letter, because sharing your story is going to be something that you're going to be doing with fundraising. Because again, this is not just about going door to door and asking people for donations. This is about allowing people to partner. So in just a second, we're going to talk about how we craft our story to do that. But with these support letters, after this call, we're going to be sending you guys a resource guide, and that's going to have all of these slides plus some bonus stuff. But then it's going to have a sample support letter that you guys can take and kind of edit to make your own. And it also has a cover letter from Pastor Johnson. Obviously, our senior pastor is incredibly passionate about people going on missions trips and having that experience. So it's nice to be able to include that cover letter that lets people know that you're soliciting donations from, that this isn't just something that you're doing, but this is something that we as a church do. So one way is through those physical letters, mailing out letters. This does cost a little bit of money to invest for the stamps and a little bit of time to do that printing and everything. But again, I do think that adds some legitimacy, especially if you're going to be asking businesses for support. And the second big way is conversations. This is great for people that you're connected with and close with. And this could be as casual as during lunch at work, just casually talking to someone about what you're doing. As Des mentioned, that's a really cool opportunity to also stretch yourself and getting ready to share the gospel through stepping out in faith to have some of these conversations. But also with people you know, that may be inviting them to coffee and just sharing with them what God's doing and asking if they'd want to partner. And the third way is probably my favorite. I love that we have this option now, and that is Go Method. So if you aren't already aware, Go Method is our central hub for everything missions. That's where you're able to sign up for a trip. You'll be able to see, once you get registered, you can see messages from your trip leaders, see when your meetings are going to be, see when your payments are due. That has absolutely everything there that you need. But one of the coolest parts of Go Method is what I was mentioning earlier, is it essentially has like a GoFundMe option too. So you can write your story And you can get a custom link that you can post on social media. You can email out to people. You can give it to whoever. Put your link in your YouTube bio. I don't know. I don't know what you're doing to share this message out. But it's great because people can literally just click and give, and it's tax deductible. It makes it so easy. But through these ways, it's great that you can have different opportunities to ask people for donations. And I would encourage you that the best way to ask for donations and ask for partnership is whatever way works best for the people that you're going to be working with. So give grandma a call, send someone, I don't think the kids use Snapchat anymore, but send them a link on wherever you send them a link on. I don't know. I'm aging myself now, but there's no right or wrong way to do this, but whatever method is going to work best for the people you're connecting with is whatever is going to be the best way. So again, like I mentioned, we have these kind of three main ways to give. But the most important part of this, and this is probably what will take the most time during this, is writing your story. And like I mentioned, we have a sample letter that we'll send to you in an email after this call. But these are kind of the things that I think make up the core essence of a support letter. And that's just starting off by saying, why this trip? Why did God call you onto this trip? Why do you want to go? Why does this matter to you? Because why it matters to you is why it's going to matter to them. Next, if you have a personal connection to this trip, that may be sharing a little bit about what you're going to be doing on the trip and what kind of ministry opportunities there are and why you think that's important. And again, why that would be important to them too. Next, talking about the what, sharing more of what you're going to be doing, what kind of opportunities you'll have. And again, talking about that partner ministry that you'll be with in country, what they do. So you can share that this is not just a one and done trip, but this is something that God is doing globally, that you get to be a part of and that your donors get to be a part of as well. And lastly, details, the trip cost, the trip dates, all the things that they would want to know as they make their consideration, and also as they're praying, where you're going, what you're doing, what dates you're going to be there. And then lastly, why their support matters. This is an invitation to support. And again, I always encourage to start by talking about prayer support, not just as a, if you can't give, I'd appreciate your prayers too, but their prayer support matters in partnering in what God's doing throughout the world right now. And then in addition, asking if they would be willing to consider partnering in that financial gift as well. So as you're talking about writing your story, something else that will be helpful to consider is follow-up, because a lot of people have really great intentions, but really busy lives. So a couple ways that you may consider doing this is sending out those physical support letters, giving the mail a couple days, because apparently it takes a lot longer than 2 days now. But after you give them a couple days to deliver your letter, reach back out to those people through phone, by email in about 2 days. Just check to make sure they got your message and see what their thoughts are. Answer any questions that they have. At that time, they may let you know whether or not they intend to donate and partner with your trip. But if they don't, if they need a little more time, doing a 2-week follow-up is great, just to check in, see what they're thinking about. And then there may be some people that say they need a little bit more time. They may have a hard time saying no, or they're just really busy. By 2 months out from the time you're starting your support letters, usually you'll be closer to your trip. And this is a great time to reach out and do another round of follow-up. If there's still people that haven't responded to you, just to update them on what your need is. A lot of my students that were going on trips, when they would reach out to me the first time, I would say, hey, give me a call about a month before your trip. Let me know where you're at, because a lot of them had great resources and were going to be overfunded for their trip. But for those that didn't have those resources, I wanted to make sure that I could sow into them. So I waited until I knew what their need was and was able to support according to that need. And some people may take that approach, but either way, it's a great opportunity just to reach out, because again, a lot of people have good intentions, but may not have the best follow through. This is not about a sales strategy to try to pressure people. This is, again, just about an opportunity to present what God is doing, inviting them to partner. you don't have to put any pressure on them, because if they are going to give, it is going to be God leading them to give. So I want to take that pressure off of you. Sometimes it feels like you can get like you're a child asking or begging for some money, but that's not what this is. You're simply presenting an opportunity and following up to ask if it's something that they would like to do and God is leading them to do. And the same thing goes whether you're doing a letter, whether you're posting on social media. If you do that, I would encourage you to record a video of yourself sharing your story. The more personal connection people can get with you, the more likely they are to see what that vision is and want to partner. But making some more posts, doing some more emails, whatever that is, I would encourage you, if you don't hear back, don't get discouraged. A lot of people just have busy lives and they aren't quite ready yet. But I would encourage you to follow up. In addition, I would encourage you on the lead up of your trip to do a follow up. And this is what I was talking about earlier, specifically with your prayer partners. So, like I mentioned, I like keeping an Excel spreadsheet or a list of mine and marking as I followed up with them what they've said, if they're interested in partnering through prayer, if they're interested in partnering financially. And about a week or two before my trips, I love reaching out to that list and letting them know the trip plan. As you're getting closer to your trip leader will give you some more details about the days and ministries that you'll be working with, the things you'll be doing. So that way you can share those with your partners so that they can pray specifically for those things. You can also share if there's any specific prayer requests, anything's going on in the country or health of your team. And then also, of course, sharing your gratitude. As Alex mentioned earlier, we have the goers and we have the senders. And you have the privilege in this season to be a goer, and you want to express your gratitude for their senders, for what God is doing with them. And lastly, we want to talk about re-entry. A lot of times you think about the trip itself, there's this huge long lead up of training, of preparing for their trip. Then you get to the trip, you do the trip, you have this amazing time, and then you get back, and what's next? So something that I would really encourage you to do if you get partners for your trip is to follow up with them afterwards, because this, if nothing else, reemphasizes the fact that they are a partner, not just someone who gave money towards your trip. They were part of this journey with you. And there's several different ways that you can do this. One, especially if you wrote a support letter for people, is following up with a letter. Of course, pictures are worth 1,000 words. So I love being able to include some pictures from my trip and just sharing the stories of what God did in me and what God did through our team on the trip to share with the people that gave, because this is really encouraging them to let them know that what they did mattered. Another cool way to do this is doing it through a video. I have a friend that I saw do this for the first time. I'm like, that is genius, because oftentimes when you get back from your trip, you're going to be processing what God did, and talking to the first few people about it is going to be really good for you to help debrief yourself. But then after about the 15th person that asks you about your trip, you're just going to be sharing the same stories, and it may get a little tiring. So I had a friend that recorded a video sharing those stories, and then also put it together with some clips that she personally took on her trip. And I'm like, that is genius. Because then again, people can even feel more a part, and they can get that personal touch from you. And something that I love doing, of course, a lot of my missions trips were to Latin American countries that had some little markets that you could get some small, super cheap souvenirs from. So I loved for my primary donors, especially my repeat donors, just bringing them back like a woven bookmark or a keychain, something small, but something to thank them for their gift to go with that letter or go with that video. Just to thank them for their support, and again, making them feel like they were along for part of the journey. So as we kind of wrap up on this section, I know this is a lot, so I appreciate you guys sticking with me. But I'm really passionate about encouraging and empowering people to fundraise, because it's not just about begging for those physical needs. It's not just a necessary evil. What we're doing is we're able to share the gospel, and we're able to help invite people alongside of us to be part of what God is doing in the bigger picture. So again, if I can leave you guys with one thing today, it's just take the idea out of your head. If it's there that you are just doing this because you have to, it's part of what you need to do to get part of the trip. But this is a way to increase your faith and invite people into this story with you. So as we wrap up, just a few quick things to go from here. Maybe you're on this call and you're just interested in getting to know more about missions trips. I would encourage you to take a look soon because it is February now, but our trips are coming up faster than you'd think. So if you are still looking to sign up for a trip, check out victoryatl.com/missions. We'll have information in our follow-up email as well, but you can explore the different trips we have available to see where God may be calling you this year. And then, like I said, as a next step, we're going to be sending this presentation and our fundraising policy, sample support letter, that cover letter. We're going to be sending those as a resource to you in email so that way you have some foundational blocks to start on as you're starting this journey. And then lastly, as Des encouraged you to, I would just encourage you to pray. Pray for the courage for you to share boldly and for God to prepare the hearts of the people that are to give. Because so often we can pray that it's time to go on the trip and then we take on the burden ourselves to figure out how we're going to get there when that's not how God intended it. That's not how the disciples in the New Testament did it. They were continuously going along the way and inviting God into it. So I would just encourage you from here to take some time to start praying that as God is leading you, that he would provide and he would give you wisdom in how to do that. My missions leaders from when I was young used to joke that if it was the Lord's will, it's the Lord's bill. But I've seen it true every time. Wherever God has called me to go, he's always provided. So I just want to encourage you guys as you're considering taking this next step, just to pray, ask God what he's calling you to, how he's calling you to support the Great Commission this year, whether you're a goer or a sender, and just that God would give you faith to where you go from here. So I've loved my time with you guys. Thank you guys so much for letting me share some of my stories with you. But I'm going to pass this back to Alex from the Victory Missions Department, and we're going to take some time. She's going to share a few more of her thoughts, and then we're going to do a little bit of Q&A. So if you have any questions that you think would be helpful for the whole group to hear, we would love for you to go ahead and put those in the chat. In our email, we'll also have email addresses that if you have some specific or personal questions, you're welcome to email us those as well. But I'm going to pass this back to Alex as we get ready for a Q&A.
So good. Thank you so much, Emily. And thank you, Des. That was some really amazing information. And as you guys can see, there's so many different ways that you guys can go about this. So I hope that you feel more empowered now than you did when you first jumped on the call. But yes, there is a Q&A section where you guys can type your questions. Obviously, we want to respect your time. So if you have to drop, you can, but we're going to stay on and answer as many questions as you guys have. And as you guys are putting those questions in, one of the things I love that you talked about, Emily, was the follow-up piece, because in my experience, that has been pivotal in the experience of fundraising for certain people. And sometimes it can seem so simple. When you think about asking someone to partner in the journey of fundraising, I myself am someone who can sometimes be intimidated because I feel like if I'm asking more than once, then I'm applying too much pressure. But what I had to learn personally was until you've received an answer, you don't have an answer. And so let that person be the one to tell you if the answer is no. And until they say no, let's assume that there is still a possibility. Or like Emily said, it could just be timing. Maybe they're waiting because they have a bonus check that's coming. So don't assume that you're being bothersome is probably the biggest takeaway that I have felt in certain seasons, is just being able to look at it from the perspective of partnership and not feel like I'm asking for someone to do something for me. This is something we get to do together. So I love that you talk about that. And the other thing I wanted to mention is Emily talked about how you guys are going to have some payment deadlines. And so sometimes it can be tough just trying to balance the part of fundraising with the fact that you have payment deadlines. So I would ask you guys, once you've identified a mission trip that you want to go on, go ahead and start thinking through your strategy. Think through it a little early on. If you know that you're going to have, hypothetically, let's say you have a payment that's due at the end of every month, be keeping those payment deadlines at the forefront. So as you're reaching out to people, you can kind of gauge where you are in your fundraising versus where you are on your payment deadlines, because there could be a scenario where you're coming up on a payment deadline and maybe you are a little bit behind on the fundraising. And it's always a great idea to reach out to your trip leader if that is the scenario that you find yourself in, just to keep that line of communication open. But we just want to give you guys the opportunity to have forethought or foresight into knowing, okay, I'm going to have these deadlines. I know I'm also fundraising, so I need to be very thoughtful about how I balance the two of those. And that may be an opportunity, as Emily and Desiree were talking about, of, okay, maybe that first payment deadline is where I'm going to personally sow into it, right? Like I'm going to make an investment into this myself, but maybe the goal is for the second and third payment deadline. That's where you're expecting to have some contributions for your donors. So just be thoughtful. Don't let it just kind of happen organically. Like really try to own that process would be my advice. Des, is there anything else you want to add as we're bringing it to a close here and seeing if anyone has any additional questions?
No. I would just, well, yes. What I will say is don't deter yourself. If this is your first time, like I say, my first time ever hearing the concept of fundraising for anything was when I went on my first mission trip to Ireland. But it was very big for me personally, having the courage and letting God give me that courage to boldly share even the vision with people in my day-to-day, which helped grow me personally with being able to share the gospel overseas, but knowing how to do it here in my own backyard, with raising money for that.
So good. Good stuff. Anybody have any questions out there? You should be able to drop them into the Q&A or the chat. We would love to answer them. And like I said, we will all be available. Well, I will say we'll all be available, but the easiest way to reach out to our missions team, if you have any questions outside of this call, is to reach out to Global Missions at Victory ATL. We have trips that we're posting all the time. Typically, you'll see trips are getting announced in the fall for the coming year. So to the point Emily made, most of the trips that are open currently are either happening in this summer or this fall. So if you do want to do a mission trip in 2024, I would highly encourage you to start making plans towards that sooner than later. However, maybe you want to take some time to put your plan together and to really pray about it. 2025 is definitely an option. So you can expect to hear more information about 2025 mission trips this fall. So you'll hear, you'll probably get an email because you came to this webinar letting you know when we have new trips that are available. But there's so many different types of trips we do. We have family trips, we have trips for students, we have trips for men and women, and we have young adults and 050. So there's a trip out there for everybody. So don't think that that there's not going to be an opportunity for you. So any questions? All right. Annie said, thank you so much for all this information. Thank you so much for joining, Annie. Glad that we could help you guys. I see some familiar names, so I'm excited. I'll be looking out to see which trips you guys jump on. Okay, I see someone raised their hand. Let's see. Abby, are you able to type your question? Okay, hold on. Okay, here. I'm going to, Abby, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yes, I'm able to unmute myself, but I am not okay. I should be able to type the question. Let me see. But I'm not able to type the question. I'm trying to type, but it's not letting me do it.
Oh, go ahead and ask it. We can hear you. Yeah, go ahead and ask your question. That's good.
Okay, so my question is now, regard to the mission trip. So are we going to be going in group? It's just that each individual will have to try to do the fundraising on their own. And then we're going to be going in a group, or are we going alone individually, or we have to go in a group?
Great question. So our mission trips that are hosted at Victory are going to be trips for groups, but a lot of times the fundraising is done as an individual. There could be times where group members decide to do group fundraising. And so some of the creative fundraising ideas that Emily shared, those are often really popular among groups. Matter of fact, I think the trip that Des went on, correct me if I'm wrong, to South Korea, they were actually selling t-shirts that said like hope or something in Korean, and I bought one and I loved it. So that was something they did as a group. So the groups have the option of doing things like that. But at the end of the day, the financial responsibility is more of an individual thing when it comes to victory mission trips. Des or Emily, do you guys want to add to that?
Okay, I'll go really quick. Just to further clarify, yes, all of our missions trips that we do at Victory are within groups. If you're interested in doing individual missions, I would encourage you to reach out to the missions department. We have I'm actually not sure what it's called now, but we have different monthly courses that can help living out that missional walk individually. But for our global missions trips, they are done as a group.
Thank you so much. I'm actually interested in the group one. So that's why I asked the question. But as to the fundraising, so that means based on the group, they might decide to, if I get you right, they might say, okay, each individual go get the fundraising, or they might do it as a group. So either way, it's okay by me, as long as I know the protocol, and I will be expecting that email.
Yes.
So do we have to go online and sign up for whatever group we want to join, or whatever mission field that we are interested in?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll include the link in the recap email, but you certainly don't have to wait. If you're already interested, you can go to victoryatl.com. Emily, do you mind typing that link in the chat? Emily will put the link, but you can go ahead and start looking now to see which mission trips are open. And if you see one that you like, the contact info for the trip leader is actually listed on that page. That way, if you do have any questions that you want to ask that specific leader before signing up, you can do that. Now, we can answer questions too, but something like the question you asked on group fundraising, because that is a trip specific question, that may be a good question to ask the person who's leading the trip that you're interested in.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining.
Alex, I think Lakosha had a question as well in the Q&A.
Oh, thank you, because I was just looking at the hands that were up. Thank you so much. Okay, so Lakosha said, what if you fundraise for a mission trip and the trip was canceled? What happens to the money? Good question. So we do have a financial policy that we're going to be sharing in the recap email, but the short answer is if Victory cancels the mission trip, any contributions that you made that were not allocated towards any type of vendor or airline or what have you, those contributions you would actually be able to use for a credit specifically for yourself to go on a mission trip in the coming year. So let me give an example, because sometimes that's a little easier. If I register for the Women's Mexico trip that's happening in 2024, if for some reason Victory cancels the trip, and none of us are able to go, and let's say I raised $800 and the deposit is $150, as long as the $800 has not been spent, that money can be saved. It's actually $800 minus the $150, so it's actually $650 would be reserved as a credit for a future mission trip that I could go on in the coming year. So I hope I'm explaining that clearly. I'm not sure if that's confusing, but we do have accommodations like that. With Israel, as you guys probably know, we just had to cancel that mission trip. And so we did spend quite a bit of time working through refunds for that trip. But if you were to have to withdraw for personal reasons, you would not be eligible for a credit or a refund. So those are things where we can always connect with you and have an extended conversation, because we do know circumstances happen, but generally speaking, that is what would happen to the funds.
If I can add one small thing really quick, as we're talking about the possibility of canceling missions trips, I do want to affirm you guys that Victory very, very, very rarely ever has to cancel a missions trip. Alex could speak into this more, but Israel is one of the first ones that I know of. And our missions department is constantly working with our partners in country and our missionaries. And of course, looking at global health across the board. Obviously, COVID was another time that we had to cancel trips that we weren't looking to. But we are constantly looking out for the safety of those participating in the trip. So Victory will make that call if needed. And of course, if the trip was canceled, then you would go from there. But I just want to affirm that Victory rarely has to cancel. And when it does, it is purely for the safety of the participants.
Yes, thank you, Emily. That's a good addition. Patrick has his hand up. Patrick, what question can we help you with? Are you able to come off mute? You can also type your question if that's easier. Okay, well, I was going to say
it looks like our chat was disabled, so they're not able to post questions in there. But Patrick, I just unmuted you, so you should be able to talk if you're able to. If not, if you want to put a Q&A question in, then we can answer it.
And while we're waiting on Patrick, Aquarius has a question about the Chick-fil-A partnership. So Emily, if you want to answer that one, it says, are you able to give more detail about requesting partnership with Chick-fil-A?
Yeah, so firstly, this is definitely not just limited to Chick-fil-A. If you know any local restaurant or business that you personally love, or that you may be friends with the owner, this is a great opportunity to ask them to do. But a lot of different places, Chick-fil-A is one that I personally have partnered with, but again, lots of them do it. You would just talk to the manager of that individual location, let them know what you're doing, and they'll essentially just set you up with a night. You can choose the date. You can choose the time, and then anyone, you'll promote it as come and mention whatever the missions trip is, whatever the code is that you set up with Chick-fil-A. You'll promote it to your friends and family and everything. They'll come eat Chick-fil-A. They just have to mention your name at the register, and then they'll give you usually 10% of the proceeds back from that time period, usually like 3 hours from like 5 to 8 p.m. or something like that. So if you're interested in doing that anywhere, I would just encourage you to reach out to the general manager of whatever location that is. I've personally partnered with Chick-fil-A several times. The one around the corner on Jimmy Carter from the Norcross campus has been really great to work with. So if you're interested, it's really easy to do.
Awesome. Any other questions, Patrick, or anybody else that is still on the call? Anything else that we can help offer in terms of information, let us know.